Suburb Search is where we recommend you start. Use Suburb Search to scan thousands of suburbs Australia-wide to find the best ones that suit you. Most investors are searching for high growth, some for high yield, some for both. You can search for cheap prices, low vacancies, whatever you like. Suburb Search works by allowing you to set filters, like your target price range, to eliminate all inappropriate suburbs. And you can sort the suburbs that match in order of what is important to you. Is it growth, yield, or anything else? Suburb Search is quite flexible, but flexibility brings complexity. So it takes a bit of explaining. Hopefully you won't need to use all these features. Most researchers will want to look at the latest data. That is why the latest data month is set by default. But one of the great features of Suburb Data is that you can investigate the past if you want to. This comes in handy if you want to validate your research approach. For example, you can pretend you are 5 years in the past researching for hotspots. You apply your research approach and see what market you would have decided to invest in using that approach. Then you can see how that market performed over the following 5 years. I'll show an example of this backtesting technique at the end of this video. For now, I'll continue with the latest month's data. Oh, and by the way, we update data around the 6th of each month. Another great feature of Suburb Data is that you do not have to search for suburbs. You can search for larger areas like postcodes or local government areas. This drop-down shows a list of the types of geographies you can search for. Suburb is at the top of the list. Now, if you're not familiar with the other geography types, you should see the Getting Started tutorial or go to our terminology page. Now, why would you search for something larger than a suburb? Well, there are two reasons. Firstly, suburbs often have unreliable data. Most suburbs have very little real estate activity each month. Typically, there may be only 1% of a suburb's properties selling in a single month, and that might only be 4 properties, for example. So can we confidently say that the typical price of a house in that suburb is based on only 4 sales? How do we know the remaining 99% of properties are like that, the 4 that sold last month? Small sample sizes make many metrics for most suburbs unreliable. To step up to a larger geography than suburbs, you might like to try postcodes or SA2s. But even these can have problems in some areas. SA3s and LGAs are an excellent choice. The data at this level is usually very reliable because the sample size is much larger than for a single suburb. Now, the second reason you might not want to search for suburbs is that you may want to take a top-down approach to your research. For example, you may want to find the best city or the best region and then drill down to the best suburbs within that city as a second step. For this approach, a good choice is to search for the best significant urban areas, or SA4s. Again, if you're at all unfamiliar with these geography types, review the Getting Started tutorial. If you decide to take a top-down approach, for example, searching for SUAs, any filter you set, and I'll come to filters in a minute, any filter you set is based on the SUA, not suburbs within it. This means you need to have wider lower and upper bounds for your filters if you are using the top-down approach. Also note that the larger the area you search for, the more likely you will miss out on finding a one-off hot suburb that was hidden within the median for that large area. For example, you may ignore a city because it has a median demand to supply ratio of only, say, 50. But there could be a couple of suburbs within that city with very high DSRs like 75. Maybe the city as a whole is poor, but has some suburbs within it that are excellent. On the other hand, if you only ever search for suburbs, you may find many of these isolated one-off suburbs that could more closely reflect anomalies in the data rather than great investment opportunities. You might like to use both the top-down city approach and the suburb level search to make sure you're not missing anything. Anyway, for this example, I will search for suburbs. You can also choose to search for houses or units or either. I recommend houses. It is too easy for units to become oversupplied. Buying a house in a built-up area helps protect investors from oversupply, but not for units. Look for units only if you are limited by price and only if you plan to own for the short term. That's to reduce your exposure to oversupply risk. This is where you set any geographical restrictions. I'd encourage most investors to leave this blank. In other words, to search Australia-wide. But there may be good reasons for some researchers to not search all of Australia. There are several options available to limit your search to certain geographies. You can explicitly choose where to search in this drop-down. For example, you may plan to renovate the property that you buy. Since you will renovate it yourself, the property needs to at least be in the same city you live in. Now, let's say you live in Sydney. In this case, you would limit the search to only suburbs within the Sydney significant urban area. You can select multiple items in this drop-down. For example, a neighbouring city might also be worthwhile considering. You can also restrict the search area using a map. Click on this checkbox to expand your options and click on this button to open a map. Once the map appears, zoom to an area of interest. In our case, that is Sydney and the Central Coast. If you are renovating yourself, you may want to restrict the search to only those suburbs within a reasonable drive from your home. So find where you live. Click on the draw circle icon to the right of the map. Then click where you live and hold your mouse down while you drag out a circle to cover the area of your interest. Then release your mouse button and click Save. You will see that the area you selected now appears as one of the search criteria. The search criteria I currently have specified will limit the search to all suburbs within Sydney and the Central Coast or within the circle. Now, if I only wanted to search the area of the circle, I would remove Sydney and the Central Coast. Now, instead of picking where to search, it might be easier to choose where not to search. Let's say you already own your own home in Sydney and 2 investment properties as well. Maybe you find yourself paying a lot in land tax. In this case, you could open your search up to the entire country, but now you exclude New South Wales since you already have too much property in that state. Maybe you don't care about land tax, so New South Wales might be okay, but perhaps those 3 properties are all in the same city and you want to diversify out of Sydney. In this case, exclude Sydney, but allow New South Wales. You can also exclude using the map. Click on this button to open the map. Once the map has opened, zoom to the area of interest. Click on the draw circle icon to the right of the map and then draw out a circle of the area you want to exclude from the search. And when you're ready, click on the Save button. You will see a description for the area you selected. Currently, the search is restricted to all suburbs Australia-wide, except for suburbs within Sydney and except for suburbs within the area I circled on the map. Now, out of all these suburbs, I want to choose some that have specific data, and this is where the filters come in. The Filters tab is where you specify the type of data you want the suburbs you are looking for to have. All suburbs that will be shown to you will satisfy these filters. You can add more filters, you can remove a filter, and you can edit the details of a filter. Looking at the first filter, this is telling the database to eliminate any suburb that has a demand to supply ratio less than 60. The second filter says to also eliminate suburbs with a statistical reliability less than 60. The third filter finds suburbs with a typical value between 550,000 and 700,000. And this filters limits suburbs to those with a yield of at least 3%. A matching suburb must satisfy all these filters. In other words, the only suburbs that match must have a DSR of 60 or more and an SR, statistical reliability, of 60 or more and a typical value between 550 and 700,000 and a yield of at least 3%. To add another filter, click on the Add Filter button. A dialog appears, and from the Metric Selector drop-down, pick a metric. If you do not care how low the metric is, you can leave the box on the left empty. And this is the case for vacancy rate. We don't care how low a suburb's vacancy rate is. But let's say we do not want a suburb's vacancy rate above 2%. In this case, type 2 in the box on the right. Now click the Save button to add this filter to the list we already have. Now we are restricting the search of suburbs even further. For a suburb to match, it now must also have a vacancy no higher than 2%. As a best practice, try to set as few filters as possible. This allows for more markets to match your criteria. Then you can sort them from best to worst. More on sorting in a minute. The more filters you set, the more chance you will accidentally eliminate a market that may have excellent investment potential. The more filters you set, the less work the DSR algorithm can do for you. So try to limit filters to your unique circumstances. For example, there is no point finding a suburb with excellent investment potential if properties there are over $1 million and your budget is only $600,000. This is why you should have a typical value filter as a minimum. The statistical reliability filter reflects your appetite for risk. Each investor is different. Young investors have time to recover from a mistake. Time cures many mistakes in property investing, but an older investor may prefer a high statistical reliability than the example given here. Now, whenever you set a filter, you should always look at a context ruler for that filter. The context ruler will tell you how unreasonable your filter is. It will tell you how likely you are to find markets matching that filter's settings. See the context ruler tutorial for more details. Apart from budget and risk, you may need to restrict your search with a minimum yield, but this is only if your mortgage broker has told you that your cash flow is very tight. If cash flow will become the limiting factor for your loan being approved, then you may need to seek out cash flow positive property markets. This would be a good reason to set a minimum yield as a filter. But most investors, typical value and statistical reliability may be the only filters you need to set. Now, don't think you will get a better list of matching markets by setting more filters. All you will get is a smaller list, not a better list. Many markets have a few occasionally bad metrics despite having excellent overall investment potential. Let the DSR algorithm pick out the best markets, not your filters. The algorithm looks at good and bad metrics and combines them intelligently. It does not scratch a market simply because that market has one bad metric. The more filters you set, the less work the algorithm can do for you. Filters should reflect your personal circumstances, not your hunt for hot markets. It's sorting where your hunt for hot markets happens. Now, one last point about filters. I mentioned the top-down approach earlier. That's if you're hunting for cities as a first step, and then after choosing the best city, you drill down to the best suburbs within the best city. If you're using this approach, you may need to have very wide lower and upper bounds for your filters, or even no filters at all. You don't want to accidentally eliminate an entire city from consideration because it has a metric outside your upper and lower bounds. It may have suburbs that suit your budget, even if the median of the city is outside your price range. This table shows the data that will be presented to you when you request the report. That is, when you click on the Get Data button. Now, of all the markets that match your geographical restrictions and also match your filters, what do you want to see about them and how do you want them sorted? The first thing you'll want to see is where they are. The name of the market is essential, but you might also like to see some larger geography names. For example, if searching for suburbs, you might like to know what LGA it is within and even which significant urban area, that is city, that it's in. Each row in this table represents one of the columns that will appear in your report. Rows at the top of this table will appear to the left of the report table. Rows at the bottom of this table will appear on the right of the report. To add more columns to your report, click on the Add button. Click on the drop-down and scroll down the list to see what is available. The extra column has been added to the bottom of the list. If you've got a few columns, you may need to scroll to the bottom of the table to see the last one added. Apart from geographies, you will also want to view some key metrics like typical value, demand to supply ratio, statistical reliability, yield or vacancy rate. Click on the Add button to add as many as you like, but you will save money if you keep the list to a minimum. The Market Metrics research tool is best for looking at a large number of metrics. Check out the Market Metrics tutorial for details. Now, to remove an item from the list, click on the trash can icon. Here you can change the metric and specify the sort priority and sort direction. The sort priority is where you specify what is most important to you. It is how you sort matching markets according to the metric of your highest priority. Now, for most investors, their highest priority should be growth, and therefore they would sort by the demand to supply ratio. The DSR is the best overall measure of a suburb's investment potential. However, a pure cash flow investor, like someone entering retirement, may not care at all about growth. They may choose to sort matching markets by yield. Whatever is most important to you, select that metric to have the first sort priority. I always choose DSR. I want to sort all matching markets by DSR from highest to lowest. The sort direction defaults to the best option, but you can change it. The markets that match my filters will be sorted from highest DSR to lowest. The ones with the highest DSR will appear at the top of the report. If two or more markets tie for the metric of first sort priority, for example, if two suburbs have the same DSR, then I can sort between those tied markets by a second metric. In this example, I've chosen my second sort priority to be statistical reliability. This means if there are two or more suburbs with the same DSR, they will be further sorted by statistical reliability. And that might be enough, but just in case there is still a tie after two sort priorities, I've chosen a third one, yield. So if two or more markets have the same DSR and the same SR, they'll be sorted by yield from highest to lowest. The last criteria to specify is the limit. You can choose to limit the count of matching markets here. The default might be very low. You might want to look at a lot more. I like to expand it to at least 50 if I'm looking for suburbs. But if I'm looking for SUAs, like in a top-down approach, I might limit it to as few as 5. The more rows you see, the more you pay for. But as is often the case, the more you pay for, the better your research will be. A focus on cutting research costs will more than likely result in picking an inferior location. You might save $100 but end up with $10,000 inferior growth. So don't get too tight, keep things in perspective. Okay, now we're ready to see how much this report will cost. It takes a fair bit of playing around to get your criteria just the way you like it. You don't want to have to re-enter all that criteria again the next time you return to Suburb Search page. So you can save your criteria for use again later. Click on the Criteria button and a dialog will appear. If this is your first time opening the saved criteria, you will only see the system-defined examples. Now you can't delete these, overwrite them or rename them, but you can provide a name to save your current settings as new criteria. And you can save multiple criteria. For example, you may want criteria specifically chosen to find cheap markets. Another criteria set could find markets with high cash flow. Another set of criteria finds high growth markets. From all the criteria listed, you can choose one to be your favourite. Whenever you return to the Suburb Search page, the fields will be automatically set to your favourite criteria. Save criteria makes it easier to get the criteria to how you like it, saving you from re-specifying everything again from scratch. A click on the Get Quote button will run the data request against the database. Instead of returning the data, it returns a quote. Cost is subdivided into how much you filter out, what you sort by, and how much you will see in the report. Because I'm in trial mode, even if I clicked on Get Data, this report would not cost me anything. Let's see what that report looks like. This is the report that Suburb Search has produced for my criteria. Because I was looking for suburbs, each row in this table is a suburb that matches my geographical restrictions and metric filters. Now, I may not be familiar with all of these suburbs, so I've qualified their location with a few other place names. I especially want to know which city they are in. This comes in handy in the next phase of research when I look at those cities using the heat map. Be sure to check out that video after this one. Rather than view a lot of metrics, I prefer just a handful of key statistics at this stage. If there is a suburb that I want to take a closer look at and view a lot more metrics, that's when I would use the Market Metrics research tool. The list is sorted by the metric I chose to be my first sort priority, which is the DSR. You will notice that each cell in the report is coloured blue to indicate that it is a link. If you click on a location name, you will see a new tab open in your browser. The name of the location you clicked on will appear at the top. The new tab shows some navigation options that are relevant to researching that location. You can now view this city on a heat map. A click on this button will load the heat map page with this city already selected. Or you can drill down further using another suburb search with the search restricted to only this city. Or you can load the market metrics page to view aggregated data for the whole city. That is the city's typical value, the city's DSR, etc. I'll go load the heat map since that is the research tool I'd like to use next. So the navigation page is replaced with the heat map page. And you can see the limit to criteria has been set to the location I clicked on in the Suburb Search report. I won't generate a heat map report. You should see the heat map tutorial for how that is done. The purpose here is to show how you can navigate from Suburb Search to other research tools. All right, let me return to Suburb Search. The navigation options change if you click on a cell containing a number. For example, a click on this metric opens the navigation page showing details at the top of the page for the metric I selected, which is for a specific market. I can now view an historical chart for this market's metric. The historical chart page loads with the market defaulted and the metric defaulted to. And I can change the period of interest from my default, or I can simply hit Get Data to view an historical chart. So use the links in Suburb Search to delve deeper. It will save you reselecting markets and reselecting metrics. The Get Log button shows a list of your recent report requests. Sometimes you want to view a report you've already seen. Click on the View button and the criteria will be set to how it was when you viewed this report originally. You can now click the Get Data button to view the report again. Alternatively, you can adjust the criteria to see a different version of the report. Note that it does not cost to view the exact same report again, but any change to the criteria will make it a different report. I mentioned earlier that you can look at data in the past rather than the latest month's data. This is handy if you want to perform a simple test of your research approach. Let's say, for example, you have a belief that suburbs with a high online search interest combined with a low vacancy rate will have excellent 5-year growth. You can go back 5 years and enter criteria to filter Australia to those suburbs. Then you can examine their performance. You can use the historical chart research tool to find out how some of those markets performed. Now, you could compare them to the national growth rate to see if those markets outperformed. You can see how much growth your suburb had compared to the national growth rate to see if you beat the rest of the nation. Now, this might not be the most rigorous way to validate your research approach, but it's certainly better than guessing.